The Sterling mansion was a monument to success, a sprawling estate of glass and polished stone nestled in a gated community in suburban Connecticut. The air inside, however, was often thin with unspoken expectations and a schedule as rigid as the corporate calendar Mr. Sterling lived by. Maria, a woman whose face held the quiet wisdom of a life of hard work, moved through the house like a ghost, a presence so familiar it was almost invisible. Her world was a meticulously organized rhythm of dusting heirloom furniture, preparing gourmet meals that were often left half-eaten, and, most importantly, caring for Lily, the family's 5-year-old daughter. To Maria, Lily was a refuge. While Mr. Sterling was consumed by his tech company, a whirlwind of flights to Silicon Valley and calls that bled into the early hours, and Mrs. Sterling by her social calendar and interior design projects, Maria was the one who saw Lily. She saw the little girl's joy in finding a ladybug in the rose garden, her frustration when her elaborate block towers collapsed, and the quiet sadness in her eyes when another promised bedtime story was replaced by an email from her mother's assistant. Maria taught Lily how to hum a Spanish lullaby, how to plant a small seed in a pot on the kitchen windowsill, and how to believe in the magic of a good story. For Lily, Maria wasn't just the maid. She was the anchor in a life that could feel distant and overwhelming. Today, the atmosphere felt different. A severe thunderstorm warning had been issued, a rare and ominous event for the area. The sky had turned a bruised purple, and the wind howled through the trees, a sound that made the expensive windows rattle. Mrs. Sterling, her face a mask of annoyance at the disruption, had a plan. "We can't stay here, Maria. The power could go out. My dinner party is tonight, and I need to be sure everything is perfect." She decided to take Lily to the Paragon, a brand new luxury shopping center that had just opened a few weeks ago. "It's the safest place in the city," she'd declared, her voice dismissing any room for debate. "They built it with the latest technology. We'll be fine. You just worry about getting the house ready for the catering team." Maria felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She had seen the building on the news, a beautiful, massive structure of glass and steel, but the wind outside was relentless, a force of nature that felt like it was testing the limits of human construction. A sense of unease, a feeling that something was deeply wrong, whispered at the back of her mind. She tried to voice her concern subtly. "Maybe it's better to stay home, Mum. The news said it's very dangerous." Mrs. Sterling, however, simply waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense, Maria. This is America, not some third-world country. We build things to last." Maria fell silent, her worry unspoken, a heavy weight in her heart. As she watched them leave in the family's sleek black sedan, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching them drive into a future that was no longer certain. The rain began to fall in sheets, blurring the world outside the mansion's perfect windows, and a news alert buzzed on Maria's old phone. "Tornado watch issued. Seek shelter immediately." The simple words felt like a siren's call, a warning only she was listening to. The Paragon Mall was a sanctuary of luxury, a gleaming cathedral of commerce where the storm outside seemed a world away. Inside, the hum of air conditioning, the gentle swell of ambient music, and the chatter of shoppers created a bubble of tranquility. Lily, oblivious to the growing danger, was in a vibrant, multi-level indoor playground, a child's paradise of slides and ball pits. Her mother, Mrs. Sterling, was just a few feet away, her attention captivated by a window display of diamond earrings in a high-end boutique, her phone silently buzzing with notifications in her purse. The shift happened without warning. It was a low groan at first, a sound that could have been a truck passing by, but it was deeper, more resonant. A few people looked up, a flicker of concern on their faces. Then came the roar, a monstrous sound of tearing metal and shattering glass. The air pressure dropped instantly, and a massive section of the atrium's glass and steel roof, directly above the food court, gave way. It wasn't a slow collapse. It was a violent, catastrophic implosion. A wave of wind, rain, and debris rushed into the once pristine mall. The sound of the crowd's collective gasp was swallowed by the terrifying crash as structural beams twisted and fell, raining down dust and splintered wood. In the ensuing chaos, fear was a contagion. People screamed, tripping over each other in a desperate scramble for the exits. Mrs. Sterling, jolted out of her consumer trance, ran out of the boutique, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. She fought her way through the panicked throng, her voice cracking as she called out Lily's name. But Lily was frozen in the playground, just on the edge of the collapse zone, a small figure surrounded by the carnage. The wall of debris, a jagged, impassable barricade of shattered glass and twisted metal, stood between her and her mother. Back at the Sterling residence, the power had finally failed, plunging the opulent house into a sudden, eerie darkness. Maria, her heart pounding with a premonition she couldn't ignore, saw the headline on her phone's news app: Paragon Mall roof collapse, multiple casualties reported. The words hit her like a physical blow. Without a thought for her own safety, she grabbed the car keys, her small hands trembling, and the last of her phone's battery life was dedicated to a single, urgent call to her husband in Mexico, a quick prayer in Spanish for strength. Then she was out the door, the wind and rain lashing at her face as she drove towards the mall, her mind a frantic mix of fear and a steely resolve. Her world had just been shattered, not by a storm, but by the desperate need to save the little girl who was, in so many ways, her own. The scene outside the Paragon was a maelstrom of flashing red and blue lights, the wail of sirens, and the frantic shouts of first responders. Maria, her car abandoned amidst the gridlock of emergency vehicles, pushed her way through the crowd. She wasn't an official. She was just a small woman with a flashlight and a singular purpose. The main entrance was a chaotic pile of rubble and broken glass, but she saw a service entrance, a door she recognized from the blueprints Mrs. Sterling had once shown her. She slipped inside, the air thick with the smell of wet concrete, gas, and fear. Inside, the mall was a war zone. The once gleaming floors were now covered in water and debris. Maria could hear the distant cries of the trapped and the methodical shouts of the first responders, but she ignored them. Her eyes, filled with a desperate search, scanned the destruction. She saw Mrs. Sterling, her expensive clothes stained with grime, sobbing in the arms of a paramedic. "My little girl is in there!" She was crying, her voice raw. Maria didn't stop. She saw the playground, or what was left of it, a twisted monument of plastic and metal. She called out Lily's name, her voice barely a whisper against the chaos. A tiny, muffled sob answered her. Maria's heart leapt. She saw the familiar red bow, a splash of vibrant color against the grey rubble. Lily was trapped, her leg pinned beneath a heavy piece of a collapsed wall. A massive, cracked ceiling panel, a sword of Damocles, hung precariously above the child, threatening to fall with the slightest tremor. Maria knew she couldn't move the wall. It was too heavy. But she saw a bent piece of rebar, a mangled structural rod lying in the debris. With a grunt, she wedged it between the ground and the loose panel, using her body as a brace. Her hands were immediately cut and bleeding from the sharp metal, but she didn't feel the pain. All she felt was the immense weight of the panel and the fear for the child beneath it. "Lily, mi amor," she whispered, her voice a mix of a prayer and a promise. "Hold on, little one. I'm here." For what felt like an eternity, Maria held her ground, her muscles screaming, her whole body shaking. The cold rain continued to fall through the gaping hole in the roof, soaking her to the bone. Mrs. Sterling, who had finally seen Maria, was shouting for her to get out, but Maria just looked into Lily's terrified eyes and offered a weak, reassuring smile. She wasn't just a maid anymore, she was a protector, a human shield. When the firefighters finally reached them, they were stunned. They had to use hydraulic tools to free both Lily and Maria, who was still bracing the rebar, her body a testament to human will. Maria's hands were a bloody mess, her face streaked with dirt and tears of relief. As they carried Lily to the ambulance, the little girl reached out and touched Maria's face. "Thank you, Maria," she whispered. Maria simply nodded, her voice lost to exhaustion. In the days that followed, the story of the heroic Maid spread across local and then national news. Mr. Sterling, humbled by the immense debt he owed her, offered her anything she wanted: a new car, a raise, her own house. But Maria just shook her head. "I didn't do it for money," she said quietly. "I did it for Lily." When Mrs. Sterling came to visit her, the distance between them was gone. The polished facade had been replaced by a raw, genuine gratitude. "You saved my little girl," she said, her voice choked with emotion. Maria, her hands bandaged, looked at her employer not as a boss, but as another mother. "She is a good girl, Mrs. Sterling," she said simply, the quiet dignity of her words a more powerful force than any contract or paycheck. In that moment, the gilded cage of the Sterling family was broken, and a new, unbreakable bond was forged in the rubble of a fallen roof.